This Siege of Boralus run is from the Horde perspective. The instance does vary a bit depending on faction, and if you want to see an Alliance version, let me know in the comments down below. Starting out here, the most notable trash is the cool Terran halberds. I do recommend you pull both of them as long as it's not a bowstring weak. They will cast Slobber Knocker, and this is a frontal smash that deals high damage and knocks back all players hit. For this, tanks be sure to face them away from your party. While you're moving down the bridge, avoid taking a swim. If you wade too long, you will be eaten by a shark. The next significant trash mobs are the cool Terran Wave Tenders. Although Brackish Bolt deals damage to random players, you want to be on the lookout for Watertight Shell. This interruptible cast, if successful, will apply a magic buff to all nearby enemies, reducing the amount of damage they take by 90%. When the buff expires, it will explode and deal massive damage and stun anyone nearby. This needs to be interrupted or purged as the highest priority. Next, we have some marksmen. They will only cast Molten Slug, which cannot be avoided unless stunned or displaced, so healers be ready. Now what you see me doing here is attacking the Scrimshaw Gutters. These mobs will give your party percent, but only if you attack them before they are one-shotted by the cool Terran Footmen. In order to trigger the one-shot mechanic, simply engage the Footmen. Be sure you're tagging the Gutters first, before tagging the Footmen. You will see later that even tagging the Footman with a ranged ability will trigger its one-shot mechanic and instantly kill the Gutter. If you have not tagged the Gutter, you will not receive percent. This middle pull can be a bit of a doozy, as you have to pay attention to both Watertight Shell and Slobber Knocker. As the tank, be sure to maintain control of your trash and position them correctly. This haste debuff you see on my character is applied by the Footman mobs. It generally isn't too scary, but it does stack and it can get out of hand. The Footmen generally die quickly due to cleave, but if you feel you're taking too much damage due to the reduced haste, feel free to kite. Now you've seen these lieutenants 100 times over, so instead let's take a look at the route. This is my generic Siege of Boralus route. There is not a whole lot of wiggle room with the top half, and there is no significant changes even on a teaming week. You really only skip the mob to the right just after the first boss goes down, as to not have to deal with Pack Masters and Riptide Shredders. You do not need to take the first two pylons anywhere specific, so placement is totally up to you. For the bottom half, again, most weeks it does not change too much. Using the fourth pylon to skip a lot of the end dungeon means that we will simply pull pretty much everything up until then. One change to note that does occur on bowstring weeks is I tend to skip the bridge pack, using the third pylon. Doing this just means you simply pull more mobs later on in the dungeon. The next couple of pulls are repeat mobs. I recommend killing the marksman first, as he causes the unavoidable damage, and remember to keep the Vanguard, which is essentially the same as the halberd, faced away. Now while fighting this pack, The mobs tend to run away, so be sure to keep them put as to not spread any unwanted dots to the boss and prematurely engage the encounter. Remember to kick those watertight shells. The first boss, Sergeant Bainbridge, is certainly a unique encounter, but very simple when broken down. First things first, kill the adds. Especially on a Tyrannical week, this is a long fight. Take note of the circles spawning at the top left of the screen. You see they are empty, while the one at the bottom of the screen is filled. The empty circles indicate that heavy ordnance bombs will land there, while the filled ones are just impact zones of cannon barrage. Avoid these. If the boss has not been kited over an ordnance bomb, he will begin to cast Hangman's Noose. This will silence and pacify its targets while dragging them to him. Run against it. Once the cast is complete, the boss will quickly cast Steel Tempest, and this will one-shot you. Be as far away from it as you can. The boss will cast Iron Gaze, and this is what fixates on a player, prioritizing the range classes, and is what you use to kite the boss over the bombs. If successful, the boss will take 50% increased damage and be stunned for 6 seconds. This also removes his stacking buff Boiling Rage, which increases his movement speed by 5% every 2 seconds. As a tank, when dealing with the adds, remember your positioning. You'll be faced with marksmen and vanguards, and we already know what they do. One thing to note is the distance on the vanguard's heavy slash. It will travel the entirety of the arena, so it's on you to be sure it's faced away. Do not sabotage your range players who are paying more attention to not getting hooked by the boss than which way the adds are facing. Rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. On a fortified week, you may opt into CCing the second wave of adds and ignoring them if your DPS will kill the boss before more spawn. Tanks, you may also opt into kiting the Vanguard around with the boss for DPS cleave, but keep in mind it becomes harder to position the slashes and requires coordinated stuns or more awareness from the group. Once you exit the arena, you will meet 2 new mobs, Irontide Marauders and Ashvane Commanders. The Marauders hit the tank with a Curse Slash, which increases damage taken by 15%, and this stacks. Dispel this ASAP. The Commanders will cast Bolstering Shout, which reduces damage taken by 75% and is applied to all nearby mobs. Either make sure all the other trash is dead before this goes off, or do your best to separate them. Well-timed roots and some kiting, AoE stuns, knockbacks, all of these help. Commander will also cast Trample. This is an easy one, don't stand in front of it. This second pylon, you do not need to drop it anywhere specific. I personally like to drag it across the bridge just to negate the rapid gunfire gauntlet. Upon exiting, we are greeted by 2 mobs. Here we have Ashvane Spotters and Irontide Powder Shots. The Spotter is the one casting the sighted artillery, the blue circles you'll see on the screen. This targets player, leaves the ring, and then a few seconds later explodes. You can use this mechanic to easily wipe out most mobs in this dungeon, as shown here. They do cause bolstering, bursting, and leave behind sanguine patches, so be sure to kill them all at once, or have utility ready to displace the ones left behind. Here's a spot where you can acquire some easy percent, but remember to tag all the gutters first. The gutters will not trigger bursting, but the footmen do. Be sure to stagger your kills, or else.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Remember to not spend too much time in the water. This bridge pack can be a bit intense. Do not forget you can CC every mob in this pack except the commander. So if you need to, it's not a sign of weakness. Play smarter, not harder. Just be sure to kick the Wave Shaper's shell, dispel Curse Slash, and maintain aggro. Our third pylon is not used to skip anything unless you're trying to avoid that previous bridge pack. Another fun pull that can get out of hand quickly, because there is a spotter in this group. Because of this, I assume people will use it to destroy the majority of the adds, and this is the reason I pull the Marauders first and deal with their bursting, bolstering, sanguine affixes, and then move on to the larger pull. The enemy to be on the lookout here is the Cannoneer. He's not affected by the spotter's artillery, and he will one-shot you if you're not paying attention. His broadside is a frontal conal ability. Be safe and move directly behind him. It is easy to get lost and forget your positioning, and this will lead to a very fast team wipe. Use the artillery to deal with the deckhands, but be mindful they will run away at low HP. Mop up the remaining adds and prepare yourself for the second boss. This is another fight that seems scary, but in reality, the hardest mechanic is avoiding tunnel vision and dodging swirlies. Anytime no one is in melee range, Dread Captain Lockwood will cast Gut Shot, a physical dot applied to random players. It's easy to avoid this. As the tank, always face the same way so the group can easily avoid Clear the Deck, a frontal cleave that is 100% avoidable. Sidestep and move back. Periodically, the boss will retreat and spawn 3 adds. Focus the Cannoneer. 1, because he still does that frontal one-shot, and 2, he drops the item needed to end the phase. Note that the deckhands will cast Crimson Swipe, so be sure to aim them away from party members. Dread Volley really can't be missed, and there is always a safe spot. Find it before the mechanic goes off and deletes you. Once the Cannoneer is dead, pick up his cannon, use the extra action button towards the boat, and resume phase 1. Now this is what happens when you do not dodge Dread Volley, and imagine not having 1 million HP. Don't worry, no bears were harmed in the making of this video. This is also what it looks like if you do in fact not clear the deck. I repeat, no bears were harmed. Rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. You can CC the deckhands on the boat before they leap off. This will cause no more to spawn, but adds a level of coordination that typically you do not see while pugging. There is a short gap in gunfire during these gauntlets, but it's much faster to just run up and engage the snipers. 4 new mobs to discuss during our next 2 pulls, first being the Giant Crusher, another mob that tanks should be facing away from the party as they do a frontal slam. Immediately followed up by a Bile Rat's Pillager's Vicious Slobber. This is also cast in the tank and anyone stood in front, so do not rotate this mob until the cast is complete. Secondly, from the Crusher, he will cast Terrifying Roar. Now this is not your typical fear, and it cannot be AMS'd or cloaked. You can immune it, but that's a waste when you have more than enough time to run out of range. Buccaneers will cast Banana Rampage, stun them, or move 7 yards away. When dealing with the Tempest, they have 3 major casts. Water Spray, does mild damage, and is very low priority. Choking Waters is a silencing debuff that does ticking damage, and it's tough to see, but Revitalizing Water, an ability that will heal an injured trash mob for 45% of their maximum health. This is the highest of priorities. Our 4th and final pylon will be used to skip the rest of the Bile Rat mobs and move us closer to the end. I like to drop it right in front of our last spotter group, but if you want, you can take it further and backtrack. This is another one of those pulls that can be annoying if the snipers do not all die at the same time. They'll stagger their sanguine pools, and they're really hard to move, so do your best to group them up, kill them all with the spotter's artillery. I recommend taking this next part as slow as possible, time permitting. The only new mobs you will face are Ashen Vein Invaders, Destroyers, and Snipers. The Destroyers will enrage themselves with ferocity, simply soothe it. The Invaders will apply a poison on the tank. Be ready to dispel or pop a CD. The second pack will contain Snipers. If targeted by Ricochet, move away from friendlies. This will do burst AoE damage. Now pulling the boss will pull the entire room. You see me pull it here just to grab the last pack of mobs, as to not waste any more time running up and then running back. The boss will reset, but the mobs will keep coming. This last pack will also contain every mob that you just faced, so be ready to deal with Ricochet, soothing the Destroyers, the Commander's Shout and Trample while dispelling the Venom debuff. Adal Dark Fathom, one of the easier fights, but requires party members to bait certain mechanics or else run out of room very quickly. As you see here, Breakwater is cast on players and leaves behind a brine pool. You cannot stand in the brine pool, so it makes sense to always bait it in a spot that will not be needed later. Example, anywhere around the statue. As for the tanks, Crashing Tide is our mechanic to bait, and it also helps keep the room clean. Never aim it towards a statue. Tidal Surge is the reason we want areas around the statue clear. We need to use it in order to be safe from the tidal wave. Now I slowed it down here because Crashing Tide will always be cast right after Tidal Surge, and if you're stacking with your party, you will 1. Kill them, or 2. Cause avoidable problems. As long as you are in line with the statue, you will dodge the wave, and this will cause your Crashing Tide to not hit the group. The only other fun fact about Crashing Tide is if you stand inside the hitbox of the boss, the ability will go over your head, and you will be able to minimize movement. Rinse and repeat this single phase encounter. Make sure your melee have enough room, and he will be dead in no time. Moving right into the last boss, the Squid, the myth, the legend, Vikgoth himself. Right off the bat, the first thing to notice is Putrid Waters. It's cast on a rogue here who gets instantly dispelled, and this causes me to go for a ride. Avoid this at all costs. Healers, wait a hair just to dispel, or melee players, don't stack on top of each other. Now the most important takeaway from this video is understanding the timers for demolishing terrors. On the first platform, it does not really matter, as the gripping terror will always aggro on pull, and this is what starts the timer for the next demolisher, roughly 20 seconds. You want to be sure to destroy the demolishing terrors as soon as possible to have maximum uptime on the gripping terrors, whilst also minimizing the amount of damage going out. For the second and third platform, the gripping terror will not be aggroed until they are tagged. This means that once you kill the first demolisher, you will have a full 20 seconds to DPS the gripping tower. However, if you tag it early, you will miss out and likely have the next demolisher up before the first one is down. Now while fighting demolishers, be sure to sidestep out of the slam ability. You may also choose to stun this ability just before it goes off. Demolishers will stop spawning once we have defeated 5, or the gripping terror dies. Once the gripping terror is dead, the engineer will be freed and start to fix the cannon. Unavailable, use the cannon to blast Vikgoth, but once the shot is out, leave the cannon and move, because he will cast Eradication, destroying the cannon and dealing damage to anyone within 10 yards. On Tyrannical, this is a very, very long boss fight, but simply rinse and repeat, remembering not to engage the second and third gripping terror until the demolisher is fully dead for maximum uptime. If you can, save Lust for the last platform, and good luck on your key. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, I hope you learned something that you can take back to your Mythic Plus group to help make timing your next Siege of Boralus key a walk in the park. Again, I want to thank you all for the support shown so far. I think we just passed 300 subscribers, and you guys are awesome, and you really motivate me to keep putting out content like this. So thank you. Be sure to leave your comments and your thoughts down below. I love reading what you guys have to say. I love answering your questions. Or feel free to join my Discord. It's there. You can sign up for my weekly Jane amount runs, keys with viewers, or just be around like-minded players that want to better their Mythic Plus experience. Till next time, guys, stay frosty.